Tonight we have developing news. Alaska has lost one of its political legends.
Around 6 p.m. this evening, Congressman Don Young's office confirmed he had passed away. Alaska's lost its longest-serving lawmaker. Young was 88 years old. His office says he passed away while traveling home to Alaska.
Don Young was currently serving his 25th term in the U.S. House of Representatives and was the dean of the House. He was first sworn in back in 1973 and most recently re-elected in 2020.
He was born in California in 1933, but Fort Yukon is home for him. He served in the state legislature from 1966 to 1973.
And reaction is pouring in tonight as the news spreads all around Alaska and the country.
Patrick Enslow spoke to Senators Lisa Murkowski and Dan Sullivan tonight and joins us now with their reactions to Young's passing.
Mike, Maria, they both described the news of Don Young's death as sudden and shocking as they mourn the loss of a man they say epitomized Alaska.
We were really blessed by Don.
Congressman Don Young's efforts on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. loomed large as he fought for Alaska, having been elected to 25 terms as a state's lone U.S. congressman.
He was 88 years old, but he was, by God, going strong. And Alaskans have seen the benefit of not only his political efforts, but his passion for Alaska.
A leader for Alaska and a leader for those who served alongside him, like Senator Murkowski and Senator Sullivan.
But to me, he was also a mentor. I learned so much from Don Young. You know, how to fight when he had to fight, how to work to get things done when you had to do that. And
he was not Washington, D.C. He was Alaska. And I think that's the legacy of a man. It's not legislation that is something that you say it was public law and number whatever it was.
Alaska's two U.S. senators called Young a friend, and both say his effect on the state he represented will be felt for years to come.
I think we're going to see all kinds of people from all walks of life coming out telling stories of how Don Young impacted them in such a positive way.
All things Alaska, but there was no phoniness to him, no pretensions. Everything that he did was to benefit his state and the people that he loved.
A presence they say will be missed in the nation's capital and back home here in Alaska.
And rest in peace, Don Young.
Senator Murkowski was in Arizona for meetings when she heard the news and says she will be headed home to Alaska soon. Senator Sullivan remains on the East Coast, where he has been isolating following a COVID-19 diagnosis earlier this morning.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi commented on Don Young's passing. She said in part that it was a privilege to be sworn in by him as dean when she became Speaker of the House. And he never failed to honor the special traditions of our treasured institution. She says his historic service brought luster to the Congress, and his many friends in the House will strive to live up to his towering legacy. And House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy also commented this evening via Twitter. He said in part, Don Young was a giant with a heart as big as the Capitol and a spirit as strong as the Alaskan wild. His absence will leave Congress less colorful and less punctual, but his decades of service filled every room and touched every member.
And Governor Mike Dunleavy has reacted to the news. He said in part in a statement late this afternoon, Congressman Don Young has been a great friend and colleague of mine for many years. I'm deeply saddened to hear of the passing of this amazing man who in many ways formed Alaska into the great state it is today. So what happens next? It is Governor Dunleavy who is tasked with calling a special election to fill Young's seat in the U.S. Congress. According to Alaska statutes, a special election must take place between 60 to 90 days after the vacancy occurs.
Don Young was well into his campaign to seek his 26th term in office.
Dave LaValle talked with the candidates who sought to replace him in the fall. Dave?
Mike, Maria, the candidates told me tonight this is not about their campaigns. Republican Nick Begich co-chaired Don Young's last campaign 2 years ago. Anchorage Assembly member Chris Constant is the Democratic candidate. Both said tonight and the next few days are about honoring the life of an Alaska legend.
Don Young, his love for Alaska, for this nation, never wavered. He was a tireless worker for our state, and he's going to be sorely missed.
Just a punch to the stomach. You know, just 2 days ago I was in D.C. and had missed an opportunity to see Congressman Young, which really hurts because now he's gone. And, you know, there's an old saying, there's a time for every purpose under heaven, and now is a day to grieve.
State Senator Josh Revak spent about 6 years as an aide to Congressman Young and spent all of that time in Alaska. The loss, he says, has hit him a bit harder than most people.
Today is a sad day for Alaska. We lost a hero and a champion for the state of Alaska and for the nation. And to me, Don Young was more than just a former boss. He was like family to me.
Don Young had served as Alaska's representative since 1973 when he won a special election held in the wake of the disappearance of incumbent Nick Begich. Maria, Mike?
The Alaska Federation of Natives also responded to the news today.
President Julie Kitka said in part, "We did not always agree. However, he was always willing to listen. And if he could help, he would."
The word spread quickly today, and throughout the state, Alaskans reacted to the news.
Their longest-serving lawmaker, the Dean of the Congress, had passed away.
I think it's going to be hard to find somebody to fill his shoes. It's going to be hard to find somebody who has his charisma, his abilities in Washington. It's going to take time to find someone who has the clout Don Young had.
Since he has been in office for many, many years, I'm pretty sure that many Alaskans will miss him. And yeah, he will be replaceable, but he'll be hard to replace.
Yeah, it's sad news. He was our guy.
Whether you agreed or disagreed with his politics and opinions, there's no disputing that Don Young left his mark on Alaska.
And his legacy is as big as the great land he loved. For the 25th time, Don Young campaigned for Congress, cast his ballot, then got ready to go back to work. In our last interview with him on election night, we asked why he had done it for so long.
I like what I do for Alaskan people. I've said I've been their spokesman in Washington, D.C., and it gives you a great feeling of confidence and when you can help people out. And that's what I've been doing for all these years. And I still enjoy the campaign. I enjoy working with Alaskans, and we get things done.
And for Don Young, getting things done started way back in 1964 when he was elected mayor of Fort Yukon. 2 years later, election to the state legislature, where he served until 1973. That same year, he won a special election to become Alaska's only member of the U.S. House of Representatives. And just hours after being sworn in, he led the battle for approval of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. He called it his single most important achievement. His colleagues honored him as Freshman Congressman of the Year. But Don Young's battles for Alaska were just beginning. More than a dozen times, Don Young led efforts in the House to open up ANWR to oil drilling, a fight he waged for decades.
I will get ANWR before I get out of this job. I've told some of those groups that don't like me, you want to get rid of me, pass ANWR.
Young was also one of the main sponsors of the 1976 Magnuson-Stevens Act, which extended U.S. fishing waters out to 200 miles and established 8 regional fishery management councils to prevent overfishing.
My MO is that you want something done, ask Don to do it.
In 2017, Young became the Dean of the House of Representatives, the longest-serving member, and he was also the oldest current-serving member of Congress.
When you think about the legislative accomplishments for Alaska, there's really nothing that Don didn't lead on in the House, whether it's ANWR, or King Cove, Trans-Alaska Pipeline. He's been involved with all of it.
But Don Young's legislative record wasn't the only mark he made on the nation's capital.
Springbuck, Puku.
His D.C. office was wall-to-wall hunting trophies.
PETA doesn't like me. I don't understand that.
Young said the unique decorations helped him keep a last frontier state of mind.
It's got a reputation on the Hill to be the most unique office, and I've always said if you don't like dead eyes, don't come to my office.
Sometimes the crosshairs were on his colleagues.
You know, I rarely do this, but I'm deeply disappointed in my good lady from Washington. Doesn't know damn thing what she's talking about.
But his gruffness often led to a quick apology.
Withdraw my offending words, And to the lady, I do apologize. I get very defensive about my state.
Don Young saw a lot of changes in D.C. In the last few years, he lamented the harsh and often bitter political divide.
I've learned how to work across the aisle, and one of the frustrating things I see that break down now. And I try to keep it together as much as possible. I'm being accused of not voting for the Patriot Act.
Go ahead and clear that up.
I did vote for the Patriot Act. I have documentation of that. In fact, I
Don,
have it
you
right
are
here.
lying. HR 3162, roll call vote 398 on October 24th, 2001. You weren't.
HR 2975.
Challengers who tried and failed to defeat him came to learn why he had such political staying power with the voters.
I think part of it is because he is very spirited, and unlike a lot of politicians, what you see is what you get. And he's a fighter.
Despite all of his victories, Don Young told us he never took re-election bids for granted.
The decision will be about, do they think I can still do the job as I've done in the past? Will I continue to do it for the future, for the good of the state?
He was running again for re-election to serve the state he loved, but fate had different plans.
You have your bright spots and you have some of your duller spots. And overall, I think I've had a lot more sunshine than I have clouds.
Don Young sponsored more than 1,100 pieces of legislation during his time on Capitol Hill. 648 became law.
That's amazing. Well, next, we'll hear from an Alaska historian about Don Young's impact on building Alaska. Don Young fought for Alaska in the halls of Congress for decades.
And he touched several issues that shaped Alaska's past and future. Joining us live tonight is UAA Emeritus Professor of History, Stephen Haycock. Stephen, thanks for joining us. And if you would, put Don Young's place in Alaska history into perspective for us. How big was his impact through the years?
His impact was huge, probably equal to Senator Stevens. It's coincidental that he should have served for 49 years, the 49th state. He was extraordinarily effective. He'll always be known, of course, as the accidental congressman, but in the same breath, people will remember that he was the longest serving Republican member of the U.S. House ever. He was, of course, rough, irascible, but he was extraordinarily effective. He knew how Congress worked, and he paid great attention to his constituents. So I think he'll be remembered as that funny old guy who got things done.
Few members of Congress, as you said, have served anywhere near the length of time Don Young was in Congress. How did his longevity help our state?
Oh, I think that the longer somebody serves there, the better they understand what it takes in order to get legislation passed. They make many, many friends, many contacts, and he was extremely good at that. He was for all of his irascibility, he was an approachable guy, and worked very effectively with people. He was personable in his gruff kind of way.
Stephen, Don Young had his share of victories. He certainly had his share of controversies. How do you think history is going to remember Congressman Don Young?
I think the controversies will probably be forgotten historically, except by those people who do a lot of digging. There was controversy with the oil industry. There was controversy over real estate in Florida. He was investigated by the FBI. No charges were ever brought. So he managed to avoid that. And I think he probably was somewhat chagrined by all of that. One of the wonderful things about Don Young was that he could learn. He changed his mind on the Affordable Care Act. He changed his mind on COVID, probably because he got it, but nonetheless, he changed his mind. Changed his mind on a number of things. He was, on the surface, he was this right-wing guy, little right of center, maybe far right of center. But in point of fact, he had a reputation in the Congress of being very bipartisan and focusing on the issue and not on the personalities that sometimes divided people on issues.
UAA Emeritus Professor of History, Stephen Haycock, thank you so much for joining us tonight to share your perspective on Don Young.
Well, and thank you, and I want to offer my condolences to his wife, Ann, and to the family.
We all do. Thank you, Stephen. Coming up next on the late edition, a police officer shot on a call this morning. He is expected to survive after a 10-hour standoff in Fairview. We'll have the very latest on what happened.
And the weekend is here. I'll have your extended forecast, but first the sun data for Saturday. The sunrise, 8:03. The sunset here in Anchorage, 8:12 for 12 hours, 9 minutes of daylight on March 19th.
You're watching Alaska's weather source.
Good evening. Check out that beautiful work of ice art, and that is out of the Fairbanks area. The World Ice Art Championships are going on through the end of the month. That is just one of those displays that is being seen in that park. We have more that are on the Alaska Weather Source Facebook page, so you can check those out. Tracy tried. Thank you for sending that in. And the incoming tide, that's Fire Island, beyond the mountains, and we get a little snap of color as the sun was setting. Now we take a look at this big picture and we see this area of low pressure still circulating in the Gulf of Alaska. This is going to continue to pump in some very strong cold air on the backside of this system as it moves into the Gulf of Alaska and continues to push east. So that will mean a mix of rain and snow for portions of the Panhandle. Its first initial wave of precipitation will be rain. We'll continue to see the chance of showers here in South Central, not necessarily Anchorage. We're just far enough away that we'll see some clearing as this low just pushes to the east. But we still have a number of conditions that other parts of the state are aware of this evening. Gusts to 40 miles per hour, producing wind chills 40 to 45 below. Those wind chills along the Beaufort Seacoast could go to 50 and 55 below. Wind chill and winter weather advisories out as a result of those winds and that combination of snow. It is both that is going to be affecting the Unalaska to Nikolsky area. Winds gusting up to 50 miles per hour, the snow being blown around so they could deal with not only just snow, but snow drifts. Here's a look at those current conditions. We have clear skies from Nome into Kotzebue, picking up sub-zero temperatures from Kotzebue, continuing as we move across the east coast or the eastern side of the north slope, 23 below in Deadhorse. It is 8 above in Fairbanks. They have 13 degrees in McGrath, down to 8 degrees for the Bethel area. And then across the Aleutians, temperatures are into the 20s. That colder, that northerly flow has brought that colder air right into the Aleutians. And by contrast, we've had southerly flow over much of the south central and southeastern portions of the state. 40 right now in Wasilla. It's down to 35 in Talkeetna after hitting 45 degrees. You can see that mix of rain and snow continuing along these coastal sections, which will be the case as we move into tomorrow as well. It is mainly this low pressure system that will be the driver of the weather for the next couple of days. By Sunday, late Sunday, just to the south, we see another low pressure system. It kind of grazes the southern end of the Panhandle with some more snow, rainfall, but this will be an active weather pattern for especially the Panhandle. Gusty winds and snow for the Aleutians, and we're kind of right in the middle, so we get a little bit of a break here in the next couple of days. Southeast Alaska, high temperatures will go from the upper 30s to 43 above in Sitka. Some of the stronger winds out toward Yakutat. So a lot of those coastal areas, the ones that face the Gulf, are going to be seeing the biggest impacts from this storm system. So that means coastal areas, Kodiak into Seward, a mix of rain and snow with a high of 37. Will go from anywhere from 32 up to 40 degrees in parts of Prince William Sound to Glen Allen and back into the Matanuska-Susitna Valley. Fairly calm, mostly cloudy skies as we start off the weekend. But we will see those breaks developing and getting even more so by Sunday. Partly to mostly sunny skies, along with the spring or vernal equinox coming our way. But it'll be a mild weekend here locally.
All right, thank you, Jackie. A man is in custody tonight after he's accused of shooting a police officer during a SWAT situation.
Michaela Clark explains what APD says happened this morning.
A road closed for hours as officers respond to a report of an assault with a hammer in Fairview early Friday morning.
While officers were speaking to the victim, the suspect exited an adjacent apartment and officers attempted to contact him. There was probable cause for felony arrest.
But the Anchorage Police Department says after talking with the subject, who police later identified as 28-year-old Dylan Spring, he barricaded himself back inside.
Once the warrant was in hand, officers knocked and made several verbal announcements to the suspect. The suspect did not respond.
And APD Chief Michael Curl says officers were forced to open the apartment door.
That coward then opened fire on officers in uniform who had made numerous verbal announcements to identify themselves as police officers.
One officer was shot in the lower part of his body, but Curl says he's expected to survive.
This suspect fired on 5 officers with the intent of killing 5 police officers. Luckily, he only struck 1.
Police shot back, but didn't hit Spring. And Chief Curl also thanked a citizen who helped the injured officer.
We had a citizen rider who performed first aid on the victim officer. He and other officers that extricated the injured officers performed first aid and did a wonderful job in helping to save his life.
Curl says after a lengthy negotiation, Spring surrendered and was taken into custody. Michaela Clark, Alaska's news source.
APD has not released which charges Spring is facing. Police say the original assault victim has non-life-threatening injuries.
Let's start things over now to Jordan Rodenberger for a look at sports.
Well, Mike, first things first, we have to update the March Madness Alaska bracket and keep an eye on those Cinderella stories. Plus, the Iditarod isn't over until the Red Lantern crosses under the Burled Arch in an eventful Friday on the trail. Stay with us.
You're watching Alaska's Sports Source.
Well, the state championship matchups are set in 1A and 2A basketball. Let's jump right through the brackets to see who will be fighting for those crowns. In girls 1A, New Halen will look to defend its title after defeating Shishmaref 61-39 tonight, and they'll face Klawak, who just took down Lumen Christi 45-34 in what should be a great title game. In the boys 1A landscape, Nelson Island pulls off the upset over the defending champion Lumen Christi. The 6th seed survives and advances to face Madre J. Sommer out at Tanana for the championship Saturday, 4 p.m. How about that for a bracket buster? The 2A girls championship matchup will feature top-seeded Wrangell and Tikyak of Point Hope in a battle for Alaska's best in the division after wins over Glen Allen and Metlakatla, respectively. 2A boys crown comes down to Nilicic and Metlakatla after Harvey Booth sent the game to overtime, where they ended up defeating Tikyak. Their title game will be the nightcap, 8:30 p.m. Now moving on to the world of collegiate athletics, the NCAA announced today that in a formally negotiated resolution, UAF has violated a number of NCAA rules resulting in major infractions. In January 2021, the University of Alaska Fairbanks self-reported potential violations to the NCAA, and the results were announced today. 18 Division I hockey players received improper temporary housing and transportation from 2018 to 2021, while 42 Division II student athletes from 2017 to 2020 competed while ineligible, such as a practice or a workout, though the university says it does not impact their most recent athletic season that was just completed. Here are the penalties handed out by the NCAA. 3 years of probation in which the school will have to attend compliance seminars, inform recruits, and have stronger reporting requirements, a $7,500 fine, a 2% competition suspension for UAF head hockey coach Eric Largent, a 1-game suspension that has already been served, vacation of team and individual records in which student athletes competed in while ineligible, so wins will be taken away, with details later announced. The school must also undergo an outside audit of its athletic policies and procedures. UAF Chancellor Dan White explained what the NCAA thought was a contributing factor in the violations.
The compliance officer had multiple duties, and they thought that kind of resulted in, some inability to have full attention on compliance. But I think, for all of us, it's not one person that runs the athletics program, and having enough eyes on it, having enough checks and balances. But we've fixed that, and our associate athletics director for compliance has one job.
UAF will not see any postseason bans or loss of scholarships, and will update the story as more details become available. Now for an update along the unforgiving Iditarod Trail as teams still try to make their way to Nome. 2 emergency rescues were made earlier today for rookie mushers Gerhard Tiart of South Africa and Bridget Watkins of Fairbanks as a result of a severe ground storm on the way to safety checkpoint. Tiart suffered a lower leg injury, Watkins a broken collarbone. Both transported to Nome for further evaluation, while the dogs were brought to White Mountain and are all okay after being evaluated by veterinarians according to the race. As a result of the rescue efforts, both mushers did scratch from the race, as well as rookie Sean Williams also scratching due to the storm. Though it was less eventful, 8 teams still remain on the trail, all resting with fewer than 100 miles to go, waiting out the storm to ease off.
Oh, wow, some close calls out there. Thank you so much, Jordan. And Jackie joins us now with a look at weather.
Well, Jordan's talking about those teams that are still trying to get into Nome. There's still that northerly wind component that they'll be dealing with over the west coast. Back into the Anchorage area, we're going to be seeing fewer clouds, a little more of the sunshine. Temperatures will remain above normal, 39 for the expected high temperature both Saturday and Sunday. It's not only a sunny day, but it'll be the spring equinox or vernal equinox that day. So a chance to see a little longer daylight hours, and as we get into next week, the temperatures remain on the warm side. So back to you.
All right, Jackie, thanks so much. Reaction is continuing to come in tonight to the death of Congressman Don Young. You can check our website, alaskasnewssource.com, for the very latest on that, and we'll have more updates this weekend on our newscast right here on Alaska's News Source. And once again, we do want to express our condolences to Congressman Young's wife and family. Good night, everyone.